Hey, what's going on, guys? Rome Gaming here, back in another video. Today's episode, we are taking a look at the Phase 3 Fire Mage. I'm aware that it says Phase 2 over here in the top left. It will not change and update for some reason, so we're just going to leave it to say Phase 2, but this is a Phase 3 Fire Mage guide for Season of Discovery. So let's quickly go over talents and runes, then we will talk about rotation, and then at the very end, we'll kind of talk about your best in slot gear. So this phase, just a note right off the bat, we're no longer taking Hot Streak as we did in Phase 2. We are now doing Frostfire Bolt. I think Frostfire Bolt personally was something that Blizzard intended for us to use in Phase 2, but it wasn't as strong as Hot Streak. So this phase, they are really pushing Frostfire Bolt, so that's probably what we're going to be using for the majority of this phase at least. Alright guys, now looking at talents here, our talents on the fire tree are going to stay exactly the same as they did last season, except instead of putting points into improved fireball, we're taking those out and we're putting those into impact here. So it gives your fire spells a 10% chance to stun the target for 2 seconds. Alright, so our talents here do change a little bit from Phase 2. We are not using fireball anymore, right? So we don't take improved fireball, so those 5 points do go into impact. Outside of that, nothing else changes from Phase 2. Everything else is the exact same. But just to quickly gloss over these, we're taking Ignite. Your critical strikes from fire damage spells cause your target to burn for 40% of your spell's damage over 4 seconds. Incinerate. Increase the critical strike chance of your Fire Blast and Scorch spells by 4%. Going to the right, of course, we have our Pyroblast. Going to the right of that, we have a Burning Soul, so it gives your fire spells a 70% chance not to lose casting time when you take damage, and reduces the threat caused by your fire spells by 30%, so very important. We are also taking Improved Scorch. This is going to function the same way as it did last phase, so stacks up to 5 times. You want to keep those 5 stacks up as much as you possibly can. We're also taking Master of Elements. Your fire and frost spells criticals will refund 30% of their base mana. Blast Wave, 45-second cooldown. A flame radiates outward of fire damage and dazes enemies hit for 6 seconds. Critical Mass increases the critical strike chance of your fire spells by 6%, so 2% per point. Firepower increases the damage done by your fire spells by 10%. And of course, Combustion on a 3-minute cooldown here. When activated, the spell causes each of your fire damage spells to hits to increase your critical strike chance with fire damage spells by 10%. This effect lasts until you've consumed 3 critical strikes with fire spells. So our main cooldown. Then we have Frost Warding, right? So increases the armor and resistance given by your frost armor and ice armor spells by 30%. We have Elemental Precision, reduces the chance that an opponent can resist your frost and fire spells by 6%. Very important there. And 5 points into Ice Shards, increase the critical strike damage bonus of your frost spells by 100%. All right, so that's talents. Again, these 5 points are the only thing that's really changing. And then, of course, all those extra points here that we're getting up to level 50 all go in the frost tree. All right, let's talk about the head rune. Not a lot going on here for PvE. We're going to take Advanced Warding in this case, so increases the magnitude of your mana shield, frost ward, and fire ward by 100%, and decreases the mana drained by mana shield by 50% for damage done. These other two here, Deep Freeze is definitely going to be like a PvP one. So it stuns the target for 5 seconds, only usable on frozen targets. So we're obviously not going to take that, as you can't stun a raid boss. And then Temporal Anomaly launches an orb of temporal energy, which slowly moves forward every 2 seconds, granting all nearby party members a shield, absorbing X amount of damage for 15 seconds. So we're going to take Advanced Warding in this case. I mean, obviously, right, because Frost Ward and Fire Ward is pretty nice, but really because Mana Shield, right? We can now use Mana Shield without just absolutely blowing through our mana if we need to. I'm not saying to keep Mana Shield up 100% of the time. I'm not sure how it's going to affect our mana late game, deep into raids, but you can safely use it for almost like soak phases, right? If you have a big amount of burst damage that's about to go out, feel free to use Mana Shield. The next new rune here is going to be Wrist. So we're taking Molten Armor here. So causes fire damage when hit, increases your spell critical strike chance by 5%, and reduces the chance you are critically hit by 5%. All right, so moving on to the Wrist rune, right? We have 2 options, Balefire Bolt, we have Molten Armor. So right now, Balefire Bolt is not working with Combustion, it's not working with Ignite either. So I think really they're wanting us to use Balefire Bolt, but for some reason it's not synergizing or working with our talents correctly. Who knows if they'll change that? I don't know if that's intended or not. But Molten Armor right now is simming higher than Bellfire Bolt. So Molten Armor, of course, is going to give us that 5% increased critical strike chance. And then Bellfire Bolt is kind of a weird one. Basically, you're going to get 10% increased damage on your Bellfire Bolt each time you cast it. And you can kind of see towards the middle of the tooltip, your damage is increased by 10% per stack, but you also lose 10% spirit per stack. So if your spirit does hit 0, you will die. So the general consensus, right, is to run this thing up to 9 stacks, let the debuff fall off, and then go back into Bellfire Bolt. But again, it's not working with Ignite, so we're just not running it right now. We're running Molten Armor. All right, in terms of runes, that's the new stuff, I guess. I mean, we talked about Frostfire Bolt, how we're not going into Hot Streak anymore. I think everything else pretty much stays the same. Let's go into Burnout here. Yeah, everything else I think stays the same. So Burnout increases your spell critical strike chance with all spells by 50%, but your non-periodic spell critical strikes now have an additional mana cost of 1% of your base mana. On the hand rune, we have Living Bomb. The target becomes a Living Bomb, taking X amount of fire damage over 12 seconds. After 12 seconds, or when it's dispelled, the target explodes. So with Living Bomb, you want to make sure it explodes, even on single target. So you don't want to refresh this until the duration is completely up. We also have Icy Veins, so hastens your spell casting, increasing spell casting speed by 20% and reduces pushback suffered from damaging attacks while casting by 100%. So you're going to be popping this in line with your Combustion. And then Foot Rune, we have Spell Power, increases the critical strike damage bonus of all spells by 50%. All right, so that's talents, that's runes. Let's quickly talk about rotation. So basically, the way it's going to work is you're going to Scorch immediately. So like pre-pull, you're going to drop a Scorch. You're going to get your first stack of improved Scorch. And after that, you're going to drop a Living Bomb to get that ticking, get that damage started, right? And then you go to 4 more Scorches for the improved Scorch. So again, that stacks up to 5 times, and that's going to increase your fire damage dealt to the raid boss by 15% in total. Last 30 seconds, you really want to make sure to keep this up. So at about like 25 seconds or so, or there's 5 seconds left on the duration, you're going to want to Scorch again, and just try to apply that buff, get a Scorch in there once every 25 seconds or so. And of course, you do not want to recast Living Bomb until it explodes. And then after that, the rotation gets pretty simple, guys. You just spam Frostfire Bolt. Now, however, I must say, before you start spamming Frostfire Bolt, you will want to pop Combustion and you will want to pop Icy Veins. So again, just to kind of summarize all that, 1 stack of Scorch, Living Bomb, 4 more stacks of Scorch, Combustion, Icy Veins, into Frostfire Bolt spam. All right, now let's take a quick look at gear. Best in slot gear for Phase 3. Starting off here, we have Eye of Flame. This is going to be a BOE. It is a world drop, so it is probably going to be a little bit difficult to get a hold of. Now, if you do have deep pockets, of course, you can just go to the auction house and buy this thing. But this is going to be our best in slot for this phase. So probably worth it to pick it up at some point. You might, check your auction house, kind of see how prices fluctuate. I'm sure if you monitor it over a month or so, you're going to find a moment where that price really drops. So, maybe, maybe not, but that is our best in slot. If you don't have the deep pockets, I'm going to recommend getting the Visage of the Exiled. This is going to come from Sunken Temple, right? You get that 1% hit. You get 21 spell damage and then 20 intellect, which is pretty much insane. Now, we do have another really good option coming from Sunken Temple here. 29 fire damage from spells, the Hikari Shroud, which also comes from Sunken Temple. All right, then for our neck, we are going Arcane Crystal Pendant here, plus 16 additional damage and 6 intellect. That's going to come from a Mage questline. It is for mages only. Up next here, we have our shoulder, so 14 intellect, 12 spirit. Looks like we have 2 different equip effects here. So damaging spells have a chance to increase your spell casting speed by 10% for 10 seconds. Then the other equip is increases damage and healing done by magical spells and effects by up to 18. and this is going to come from the tailoring profession. All right, moving on to our cape, we have the Huku's Hex Cape. So going into it here, we have 10 elect and then 15 spell damage. This is going to probably be coming from Sunken Temple. Looks like the next best capes for us are going to come from tailoring here. So the Cindercloth Cloak, you can pick that up off the auction house pretty cheap probably. If you don't want to get that one, there are a couple from BRD as well, the Sunborn Cape and then the Spritecaster Cape as well. All right, so let's look at the chest, and this is a good opportunity for us to also take a look at the set bonuses, right? We haven't talked about that yet. So the Malevolent Prophet's Vest here, that's going to give us 11 intellect, 7 stamina, 23 spell damage, and then a 1% increased crit. So that's just the equip from the chest. Now, if we go down to the set bonus, right, the first set bonus is improves your chance to get a critical strike with all spells and attacks by another 1%. And then your final set bonus here, your damaging spells have a chance to cause your target to take 50 increased damage from subsequent spells. So really good set bonus. If you don't have that, hopefully you get the Irradiated Robes, right, from Nomergan. And there's also just a whole bunch of other decent stuff that drops from Sunken Temple that you could get your hands on here. But if you can't get your hands on any of this stuff, probably just the Cindercloth Robes from the auction house are going to be your best bet for that 27 fire damage. All right, looking at the wrist, you got a couple options here that are going to be a little bit difficult to get if you are not engineering or if you're not Exalted with Warsong Outriders. Dryad's wrist bindings are going to be our best in slot. 6 intellect, 6 spirit, 7 stamina, 20 spell damage. That's awesome. We also have this from engineering. So we have the Invoker's Vambraces here. 8 intellect, 7 stamina. The equip provides protection against certain types of psychic attacks. And then the unused channels of Power Void, granting immunity to fear. And then obviously the equip that we're actually worried about increases our damage by 21 on equip. All right, then our weapon is going to be Hubris the Bandit Brander. 11 intellect, 12 stamina, 20 increased damage. That's going to be coming from Sunken Temple as well. There's also a pretty sick staff in here, the Spire of Hikari Worship. It does give us 2% crit. However, unfortunately, it only gives us 20 spell damage overall. So it's just not as good as the one hand. And excuse me, that is actually 19 spell damage, right? So, you know, if you kind of look on the right-hand side here, we haven't gone over the offhand yet, but we'll just cover it right now. Just comparing this to the two on the right, if you look at the Blood Prophet offhand, we're getting 7 spell damage from that. And then we're also getting 23 fire damage from the offhand, right? So that's, you know, the 2% crit is awesome from the Spire, but it just does not outscale, you know, a one-handed in this offhand in this case. Okay, so we've gone over weapons. Let's go up to the Hexer gloves. So Atalai Hexer's gloves, 16 intellect and then 19 spell damage. Looks like we do have a bunch of tailoring options like the Dreamwave gloves, the Cindercloth gloves. You can pick those up off the auction house if you wanted to. And then there's also the Earth Warders gloves that you could probably pick up from Winterfall activity here. I haven't looked into that a whole bunch, but might be something to look into. But yeah, definitely looks like our pre-raid BiS is going to be coming from tailoring most likely. All right, looking at our waist here, we're going to be picking up the Bonecaster's Belt of Fiery Wrath. Looks like this tops out at 26 fire damage, so you'll probably find different variations on the auction house. So just try to find the highest one that you can find. Now, this probably will be going for a lot of gold, so you can go into BRD and get this sash here for 11 intellect. It will give us some hit and then 12 spell damage. Then for our legs, again, we're just trying to stick with the set bonus, right? So 19 intellect, 6 stamina. It's going to give us 23 spell damage, and then that set bonus that we already talked about earlier. And then same thing for the feet here. We're once again chasing that set bonus, so 6 intellect, 6 stamina. It's going to give us a 1% crit and then 15 spell damage. Now, one thing going back to the legs, right? Obviously, we're not going to have access to a lot of this stuff early in the phase. You can go pick up the Cindercloth leggings from the auction house. It says multiple vendors here. And digging into this a little bit more, it looks like there's a vendor somewhere in Swamp of Sorrows that sells this. I don't know if it's like it's a rotating item. Sometimes vendors kind of work like that, like One day they'll have specific things for sale. One day they won't, but looks like here it is, Cindercloth leggings. So you might go check that out. And of course, if you can't get a hold of those, we have, our Gnomer legs, the irradiated trousers, and then the red Mage Weave pants as well, which come from tailoring. Going back into the feet, there are multiple options here like Cindercloth boots or the spider silk boots. Looks like they both sim pretty close to one another, so I'd probably just go for the cheaper option on the auction house. Oh, and sorry, of course, the spider silk boots are bind on pickups, so probably you're going to be going for the Cindercloth boots in this case. All right, going on to the rings here. Band of Boiling Blood is going to be our first one here. So 14 stamina, 4 intellect, and then 17 damage to fire spells. So some rings this phase, like these Drake Claws down here, are not unique equipped, but this Band of Boiling Blood is unique equipped, right? So you can only get one. So in your other ring slot, you're going to be going the Drake Claw Band of the Harbinger. So 12 spirit, 11 intellect, and then 15 spell damage. So it looks like the Boiling Blood's going to come from the new Blood Moon event. So it's probably going to cost some coins. I'm not sure how much as of right now, but you can probably look that up. And then the Drake Claw is going to be coming from Sunken Temple. All right, so our best in slot trinket, and the first slot is going to be the Combustion Chamber coming from Gnomergan. 6 intellect, and then the on use is not useful. It's not super useful in my opinion. And then the equip at the bottom, 12 spell damage. So the new trinket is Breath of the Beast. So the equip is improves your chance to get a critical strike with all spells and attacks by 1%, and then 1% hit. So it's not bad, but it's just not as good as the Combustion Chamber down here. And then we also have the other new trinket here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, the Blood Ritual Charm. So the on use increases your spell damage by 96, and your healing by 192 for 20 seconds. Sorry, it's moving around there. Then it says every time you cast a spell, the bonus is reduced by 8, and the spell damage and the healing is reduced by 16. And I believe that's coming from Sunken Temple as well. Then finally for our wand here, another one from the auction house. You probably already have a similar one, just the item level went up. So the Wizard's Hand of Fiery Wrath, so plus 19 fire damage looks like where it kind of caps out at. So this one specifically requires level 48. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and we will see you all in the next one.